Nothing says it's Christmas like your favorite movie. Maybe you like Home Alone, Elf, It's a Wonderful Life, A Christmas Story, The Holdovers, or the good parts of Love Actually. But there's another, often forgotten kind of Christmas movie that rarely makes anyone's top 10. The kind of movie where two hot people are brought together by the magic of Christmas. The kind of movie with a poster featuring one person in a green sweater and one person in a red sweater. The kind of movie that always has a happy ending. The Hallmark Christmas movie. Hallmark pumps these things out. They release so many that it's hard to believe some of them are real. Let's get to the bottom of this. How many movies does Hallmark make every year? Why do they all have the same plot? And how did a greeting card company become a Christmas movie empire? Hallmark started in 1907 as the Norfolk Greeting Card Company when high school student Joyce Clyde Hall, although he preferred JC, alongside his brothers William and Rolly, started selling postcards out of the bookstore where they worked. By 1913, the business was booming enough for them to open their own store in Kansas City, and fun fact, in 1917, they invented wrapping paper. Their store ran out of tissue paper, which was what they used to wrap presents back then, and instead of giving them nothing, they just used this fancy French paper that was supposed to line the inside of envelopes, or envelopes if you're freaky, and wrapping paper was born. There isn't a ton of info about J.C. Hall as a person. It seems like he was a good man, he was active in his community, he gave a lot of money to charity. He also had some very powerful friends. I found this obituary of him that stated he was friends with Winston Churchill, Dwight Eisenhower, and Harry Truman. He probably sent them the nicest cards. Roses are red, oranges for peaches. I liked when you said, "We shall fight on the beaches." Hallmark continued to sell greeting and postcards and even expanded their business into TV when they launched the Hallmark Hall of Fame series of made-for-TV movies in the early 1950s. These weren't really Hallmark movies as we know them now. They were mostly just plays adapted to TV, but they were like a big production. They had significant stars like Grace Kelly and Robert Redford and James Dean. Since beginning in 1951, these movies have won a combined 9 Golden Globes, which is impressive for some reason. They've also won 81 Emmys. What I'm trying to say is they were successful. They've made 270 of these things, an average of 3.7 every year, which is impressive, but as we're gonna see later, rookie numbers compared to what they're putting out now. Hallmark's best years are still ahead of it, but they gotta get through some bad stuff first. In 1980, this hotel called the Hyatt Regency Kansas City was opened, and it had this massive atrium with 3 beautiful walkways stretched across. It was a social hub for the city. Every week, they hosted something called a tea dance, which is what my grandma calls that Chapel Roan song. But it was actually just a party where people came and danced and drank tea, which sounds like a really nice time, except one time it wasn't. On July 17th, 1981, the hotel was hosting the tea dance. There were around 1,600 people in attendance. People were dancing, talking, presumably drinking tea. At 7:05 p.m., there was a crack, then blackout. The 4th floor walkway, which was directly above and supporting the 2nd floor walkway, collapsed. They crashed to the floor with people on, below, and between them. 64 tons of steel, concrete, and glass. It took 14 hours to rescue everyone from the rubble. It was chaos. 111 people lost their lives at the scene, with another 3 dying in the hospital. A further 216 people were injured. It was eventually determined that the Hyatt Regency collapse happened because the engineering firm that was hired to build the hotel had sort of taken some shortcuts and changed the way the bridges were suspended last minute, and they didn't make any calculations about how the weight of an entire bridge would affect the structural integrity of one of the walkways, and down it came. It remains the deadliest accidental structural failure in US history. Now, what does this have to do with movies like Operation Nutcracker, 'Twas the Date Before Christmas, and Time for Her to Come Home for Christmas? The Hyatt Regency was owned by the Crown Center Redevelopment Corporation, which was a subsidiary of Hallmark Cards. So it wasn't all roses and daisies for Hallmark. They did have some bad times, but their reputation was hardly damaged from the incident. The Kansas City Star won a Pulitzer Prize for their reporting on the tragedy, and they were very critical of Hallmark. But still, it's not like many people are thinking, well, Hallmark doesn't build good buildings, so I guess my nephew doesn't get a birthday card this year. And if you're thinking, Britt, They could just buy other brands of cards. When was the last time you looked at the brand of a card you were buying? You find one with a funny picture of a dog, it gives you a little giggle, and you say, okay. The president of Hallmark at the time of the collapse was Donald J. Hall Jr., the son of J.C. Hall. He took over the presidency from his father in 1966 and died while I was making this video. He didn't stay on for very long as president, stepping down in 1983, about 20 years before the Hallmark Channel was launched. Prior to rebranding as the Hallmark Channel, it was actually called the Faith and Values Channel, and it aired mostly religious programming. In 1998, Hallmark and the Jim Henson Company bought stakes in the network, which was at this time called Odyssey, and they started making some changes. It still aired a fair amount of religious stuff, but just now it was mixed in with The Muppets and Fraggle Rock. It was around this time that Hallmark started producing their own original movies, but they weren't the ones we know today. They were movies like The Christmas Secret, which was about a man who got really obsessed with figuring out if reindeer really know how to fly.
Right front hoof. They're designed for greater lift and higher angle of thrust.
They rebranded to the Hallmark Channel in 2000 and ditched the Muppets, but continued on with their own original programming. But it wasn't until like 2009, 2010 when Hallmark movies as we know them started to pop up. And what made this change? Bill Abbott. He's kind of the bad boy of Hallmark because he's like a bad guy. Allegedly. In 2009, Bill Abbott became the president of the Hallmark Channel and immediately started shaking things up. He targeted their content toward a younger demographic, women aged 25 to 54. To really entice them, he made some changes to the basic plots of the movies. He introduced the trope of a successful, usually career-driven woman, often a bit of a Grinch, who goes to a small town at Christmas and discovers the magic of the season and usually the love of her life. You know that one? He made a big splashy premiere for it too, the Countdown to Christmas, where every week starting in November they would air a new movie all the way until Christmas. In 2009, the Countdown aired 4 movies. In 2024, they're airing 10 times that many. So that's the Bill Abbott effect. But he's also not a good guy. Allegedly. And here's why. In December 2019, Hallmark aired an ad with a same-sex couple kissing on their wedding day. And then they received backlash from conservative groups, so they pulled the ad. But then they started receiving backlash from other groups who were saying, there's already no representation in Hallmark movies. How can you pull the one commercial that we have? So they reinstated the ad. And then about a month later, Bill Abbott stepped down and began his own network called The Great American Family. So, you know what he's into. When he left, Hallmark pretty much immediately started making movies with LGBTQ+ storylines, starting with The Holiday Sitter. And that's kind of representative of where Hallmark is today. They're in a transitional period between their old American values-based, mildly religious programming, and their new, still kind of American values-based, still a little bit religious, but just now with queer people programming. Baby steps. So, how many Hallmark Christmas movies are there? This list on IMDb says there are 475. They started out pretty slow, making only like a few movies every year up until the 2010s when they really ramped it up, and they've kept climbing ever since. This year, they're releasing 47 new movies. If they keep increasing at this rate, they're going to be making 100 movies a year by 2043. Florida will be gone, but Hallmark will remain. And once they're putting up those kind of numbers, it's only a matter of time until they release one that's like awesome, right? That even Martin Scorsese's like, that's cinema. One of the main reasons I was interested in talking about Hallmark at all was I was curious of the finances of it. If they're making like 40+ movies a year, they must cost like $4 each, right? Turns out they do cost more than $4, significantly more. But they are still considered pretty cheap for movies, coming in at around $2 million each, with $50,000 budgeted just for snow. I didn't even know movies could budget for cocaine anymore. That's just a little joke. Of course they can.
So go back to the club.
If they're making, say, 45 movies a year at $2 million a piece, that's $90 million, with $2 million a year just going to fake snow. Marvel spends more than double Hallmark's annual movie budget on a single movie, and I'm gonna fall asleep watching them on the couch all the same. And it's pretty much for the same reason. I know what's gonna happen. In superhero movies, the heroes save the day. In Hallmark movies, the two good-looking people are gonna get together and share a kiss right at the end of the movie. Also in both, everyone's hot. It's comforting, you know what you're getting. It's kind of similar to how it can be weirdly comforting to like visit a McDonald's in a foreign country. Yeah, some stuff's gonna be different, but the Big Mac's gonna taste the same. Pretty much every actress in Hallmark movies is familiar and famous for one role. You know, it's the type of person that you see her and you go, oh yeah, her from that. The three major Hallmark it girls are Candace Cameron Bure, Danica McKellar, and Lacey Chabert. Two of them have actually left to join Bill Abbott's Great American Family channel, so only Lacey Chabert is left. The men of Hallmark are a little less consistent. They're the type of people you see and you go like, oh yeah, I know I've seen them in something. They're actually at a point where they're so desperately looking for their new Hallmark hunk that they've launched a competition show called Finding Mr. Christmas. As far as what the stars make, it's hard to get an exact figure, but it seems like it's somewhere between $50,000 and $200,000 per movie. And they can usually do like 2 to 4 movies a year, so they're making pretty good money. So we know the history, we know the budgets, we know the stars. What's the best Hallmark movie? I kind of went into this thinking that there would be one Hallmark movie that everyone's like, oh, that's by far the best one. But that doesn't really seem to be the case. I scoured a ton of top 10 lists, and most of them don't even have the same top 3. Maybe it's because they're so formulaic, or maybe it's because being good isn't really the point of Hallmark movies. Their goal is to share a little Christmas cheer and remind folks what this season's all about, and make a butt ton of money. Hey, if you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you, and also please like and subscribe.